Hey everybody! I figured I would do a little Q&A video. I get a lot of comments and questions on certain embroidery things, and while I answer a lot of them in the comments, they're all really good questions, so I figured that I would take you along with my little stitching project here. I'm working on this for my Patreon as a tutorial, and I'm just going to be stitching, and I figured I'd read off some questions and do kind of a question and answer kind of video. I don't do these very often, but I like to do them every now and then. I have answered a lot of these before in the comments, but I figured I would share them because they are helpful for a lot of other people as well. So let's get into it. Hot Soup asks, after finishing the stitch, do I tie another knot, then cut it off like sewing? Yes, you can tie off embroidery like you do in sewing. In fact, I like to do a sewing finishing knot, but there's actually a variety of ways to secure the threads. I definitely recommend that you start and end each individual thread one at a time, and you don't leave it on the back because a lot of the times it will get tangled if you go on to another color. If you don't like to finish your threads like individually like that, you can park your threads on top of the fabric. That's just where you would pull the thread through and just kind of leave it draped on the surface of your fabric. That way it keeps it out of the way so that you don't have a jumbled mess on the back of your embroidery. So yes, I would highly recommend that you try to end all of your embroidery threads. If you don't want knots in your work, you can tuck the threads underneath of existing stitches to secure it. That's one way of doing it. There's actually a variety of ways to start and end threads, and I have a video that I will try to link in this video somewhere so that you can check that out if you're interested in learning some of the different methods. I made a stick and stitch video a long time ago, well, not a long time ago, but a few months ago, and 89 Sethi asks, can this product be reused, say on multiple squares of fabric? I just purchased it with a pattern for a tea towel. Thank you for the tips. I would say if you're talking about reusing individual stick and stitch stickers for designs, it can't be reused. It actually will wash off and dissolve. But if you get the sheets of stick and stitch, you can cut out whatever you want to use and keep the leftovers to use on other projects. So that would be a way that you could kind of allow it to go a little bit further. I know it's kind of expensive, so it is nice to save as much as you can. You won't be able to print it through your printer if you cut it out, but you can easily use like any sort of pen or something like that on the surface of the stick and stitch to transfer a design over, similar to how you would trace it onto fabric to use it. I would just recommend that you test out whatever marker you're using to be sure that it's not going to bleed all over the fabric. Chelsea Bowden 1584 asks, what are your favorite hoops to use? I generally prefer to use beechwood hoops. I will grab one so you can see it. This is a beechwood hoop. They are a lot more heavy duty than a lot of the bamboo ones and like the more pressboard ones you can find at the craft store. You can get these on Etsy and Amazon generally. I buy mine wholesale for my kits, but I've bought them off of like Amazon and Etsy as well, and they're all pretty much the same quality. And it has really nice hardware on the top that's really heavy duty. Beechwood is generally just like one solid piece of wood, which makes it a lot more durable, and I just think there's less warping on these, so that's why I prefer these, because they grip the fabric really well. So definitely recommend. I'll leave a link in the description to the ones that I've gotten before if you want to check that out. So I did a reel or a YouTube short about hand embroidering a knit sweater, and Russian Rain asks, do you hand wash your sweater to avoid the washing machine from taking out your stitches, or is there something else you can do, such as putting a patch behind the design? I just finished embroidering a small section of my jeans, and I added fabric glue to the ends and knots of my stitches. I have a feeling that might not be enough for the design to hold in the washing machine. What do you do? Lovely design, by the way. Thank you so much. I generally do not add anything to the back. Generally, I just make sure that I secure everything with knots, and I also just kind of make sure that I'm using embroidery stitches that aren't super able to be like to kind of loosen. So like say if you're using the satin stitch, I would make sure that your stitches are really short, because if you lengthen them too much, the stitches will sag when they're not under tension, and it just kind of puts you at risk for having the embroidery pull out. In regards to the washing machine, I usually will hand wash clothes that are embroidered on, but you can also use the delicate setting on your washing machine. I feel like the biggest problem with washing clothes is generally the dryer on top of everything. So I would highly recommend that you dry something flat or hang dry it and you don't put it in the dryer. I would be more worried about the stitches coming out in the dryer just because of the friction of it tumbling around. And it also just kind of makes the stitches kind of fuzzy after you dry it. So I would say delicate setting or hand wash with like mild soap. I will link to my video about embroidering on sweaters in case you want to check out some more tips. I have a bunch of tips in that video, so I'll make sure to link that as well so you can check that out. Creative Mind 25 asks, how do I know when I need to throw away the needle and start using a new one? Generally, I like to try and keep my needles for as long as possible. I invest in higher quality needles, which I will link to a post that I have that has a bunch of recommendations in it, but they tend to last me quite a while. But I like to use a needle sharpener on them every once in a while, and this pincushion here has an emery needle sharpener in it. This is great to have. They're like a few dollars at most craft stores, so they're actually really cheap and very useful. So that's normally what I do. I just run my needles through a couple of times if I feel like they're starting to get kind of squeaky or harder to stitch with. And then if you're using needles and they start to tarnish, they start to bend, or maybe the eye of the needle is like kind of hard to thread through, I would say you would probably want to go ahead and throw those away. But in the scheme of things, I would say I use needles for multiple projects normally, and I'm able to keep them relatively sharp. The sharpener will kind of eat up your needle after a while if you use it too much. I've noticed that you get almost like little burrs in the end. So it's definitely not like a lifelong solution, but that's generally what I do. Terry Lynn 1771 asks, I thought you only used 3 pieces of thread at a time. This was a YouTube short that I did about thread painting. For thread painting, I actually generally only use 1 to 2 strands at a time, but you can really use however many you want. There really is no rule as to like what quantity of thread you should use. For thread painting, I do think it's a lot easier to blend colors together using 1 strand. It's just a little bit more subtle when you blend it. But for instance, like the dress on this little mouse that I'm stitching right now, this one, I'm actually using 2 strands for the long and short stitch. And I think it just looks a little bit more painterly when you do that. So that's what I like to do for thread painting. If you're doing other kinds of surface embroidery, in the past, I used to use 6 strands all the time. That's a little crazy to some people, but I think that it's doable, and sometimes it looks kind of cool. So Susan Peterson 8278 asks, when you double your fabric, are you using linen or muslin, and would it matter? I use either one, but most of the time I find a lightweight muslin to use just because it's really cheap. So it's more of like a price point that I feel like I wouldn't want to use nice linen to double up with. But the muslin is nice because you can find it in a variety of weights, and you don't need anything like super heavyweight to layer it. You don't want to really use anything super heavyweight because then it's going to be harder to stitch through. So I would recommend doing something that's like pretty lightweight. For instance, you can find muslin at most fabric stores, and it's very, very cheap, and there's normally a couple of different weights on it if you just look at the info. And then another good one is Kona cotton. I like to use Kona cotton and just double that up because, again, it's not super expensive, so I don't feel guilty like using it on the back of something. You're able to double it up without any problem. Audrey asks, I am new to the embroidery club here. I'm curious, what app do you use to make your patterns? First of all, welcome to the embroidery club. This is an amazing base to be in, I think, and I hope you're enjoying everything so far. I use Procreate to make my patterns, and it's just like an app that you can use on an iPad Pro. I'm not sure if there's other tablets you can use it on. I think it has more than enough capabilities to design stuff, and it's just kind of like a simpler thing. I do carry a physical sketchbook as well, but I like Procreate because you're able to use a lot of the aids that it has. Like it can smooth out lines and you can work in layers. I actually made a video of going through the basics of how to use it, so I will make sure to link to that if you want to check that out, and you can just see what the capabilities are before you maybe invest in an iPad if you don't already have one. And I hope that's helpful. Brown Eye Lady 6726 asks, I have a question please. What fabric would you recommend? I generally like to use cotton or linen fabric, but you can embroider on a variety of different things and it works just fine. I would just say to stick with natural fabrics that are a little bit more tightly woven. It allows you to fit in a lot more detail into things. It won't stretch or distort your stitches. So I recommend Kona cotton. And then there's also a few other places that I like to purchase linen. You want to be careful that you're purchasing the right weight of linen. If you type in like Needlecraft linen, you can find some of the thread counts and the weight of linen that's good for needle crafts. So I would highly recommend starting with those. Those are very beginner friendly, and even as somebody who's stitched for a long time, that's what I generally use and stick with, because it just normally makes your embroidery look really nice. So try those out and let me know what you think. Wokey B asks, I want to get into embroidery. It looks so relaxing. What do you do with all of these when you're done? I love embroidery and it is very relaxing and meditative, so I highly recommend it. I hope that you try it out and you enjoy it. With embroidery, the go-to is people will frame the embroideries in hoop frames or in embroidery hoops and display them on the wall, but you can also frame them, and you can also, I mean, it's very functional. You can make tea towels out of it. You can embroider on clothes. You can embroider on pieces of fabric and assemble different things. Like I've made like a hair bow and a book cover. There's so many different things that you can do with it. So I really like it because I feel like it's very versatile. You just kind of have to think outside of the box. If you can embroider on it, then try it and see if you can create something new or upcycle something, like some sort of fabric. I'm a huge proponent of trying to make things more useful, so I really like this question. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I know it's a little bit different, but I've been kind of mixing things up a little bit and trying out a few new formats for videos. The tutorials aren't going away, but I just like to have a little more of a chatty video from time to time and just kind of address different questions that would be helpful for people. So please give this a like and subscribe if you enjoyed this video, and if you want to see more embroidery tutorials and embroidery content, please follow along, and I'll see you in the next video.